Well, good morning, church. I think we have some different congregations represented today for our special service. It really was after our service because our service is going to be quite short. If you've just arrived, kids are going straight back to kids ministry. If your kids are here, they can go straight back to kids ministry, and they'll be there till noon. I'm going to do a short sermonion. We'll have a song, and then that'll end service. That'll end it. It's over at that point. Service is finished. And then we begin something else called a workshop, led by Dr. Kanzan, who's here and done a great weekend for us so far on sex and sexuality. And today is going to be how to talk to young people about sexuality. And so even if that tangentially affects you in some ways, we do encourage you to stay. That's going to be two sections. So a 45-minute section that'll end at noon. And at noon, so that's going to be front-loaded with stuff for young families. So if you're a young family, at that time, we'll have a song so you guys can be dismissed to grab your kids. And then for kind of older kids, non-littles, that second 45-minute section will be for you. Anyone's welcome to all of them. That first one especially, it's all super relevant, even if you don't have kids, because it's talking about the theology of sexuality, which will relate to all of us and be super helpful. And then we'll be done. We actually lose this room at 1, so we'll be done right up until that 1 o'clock time. And we'll be dismissed for the day. The other kids will all have, and teens and preteens will be dismissed after this, so that they'll have games and things like that in the small gym and out here in the cafeteria. We have a lot of workers, and the shepherds have worked hard to make sure that the teens and preteens will be taken care of. So everything is set. Today is a day of plates spinning. So without further ado, let's spin the first one, and let's open to Revelation chapter 2. It is good to be here. We are talking about Revelation. And last week we talked about what exactly is happening here in Revelation, which is John the Revelator. He is having a revelation here on the Isle of Patmos, and he is seeing not a world above ours or below ours, but a world overlapping ours. A spiritual world that exists right behind our eyelids that we fail to see, but sometimes we can feel it. And sometimes, if we take time, we can see it. And what John sees is concerning. It's that Jesus is walking between the 7 gold lampstands, which are the churches, and the 7 spirits that correspond to those churches. So every church has a spirit. That spirit corresponds to the character of that church. There's a spirit that's associated with Capital Collective. There's a spirit associated with Capital Rivers. A spirit associated with the Greater Baltimore Church, Frederick, and many more, Northern Virginia. All of them have a spirit associated with them. And as Jesus walks between those lampstands, he investigates the spirits, and he has things to say. One of the coolest things about God is that he has something to say to us. The question is are we interested at all in listening to him? Are we interested in hearing what he has to say instead of just trying to expound on what we have to say? And so we're going to go through. You might say, well, how is this related to the Holy Spirit? Well, because after each letter, Jesus ends with, he who has an ear better hear what the Spirit has to say to the churches. That if we don't listen, that the lampstand will be taken away. And as we talked about last week, I am in no hurry to figure out what that means. The lampstand can be taken away if our spirit is not something that reflects the character of Christ. And we have 7 different letters to 7 different churches. And even though chronologically, I was raised from a lot of us in a Church of Christ tradition, and the Church of Christ in me said you cannot deviate from the order of the verses. You must go verse by verse, for that is the way it was written. Thank you, Church of Christ. I appreciate that. It's a very important lesson. But as I sat in the Spirit this weekend and thought about, man, what's the one for today that's going to really, I think, be on my heart, is actually the second one. And don't worry, Ephesus. We're going to get to Ephesus. Some of you were looking forward to Ephesus. We're not going to not talk about Ephesus. I just said the word Ephesus 5 times. We're going to talk about Ephesus on Wednesday. So come back this week to talk about Ephesus, but we're going to skip to Smyrna. So in chapter 2, verse 8, we're going to look at Smyrna. It's a little more conducive to our short sermonion today. And then Wednesday, we'll have a lot more time. We'll have a whole hour to actually dive into the Ephesus letter, which is, you've forgotten your first love. So one that we're familiar with. But Smyrna, maybe not so much. Of the 7 churches that letters are written to here, Smyrna is the only one that still exists today. It is a city that is called now Izmir in modern-day Turkey. And here, let's read what the Spirit has to say to the church in Smyrna. In verse 8, it says, to the angel of the church in Smyrna, write, these are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews but are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Whoever has ears, let them hear to what the Spirit has to say to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death. It's an intense letter, and a lot of these are intense. We talked a little bit last week about how Jesus has things to say to us. Are we willing to listen, even if they're hard, even if they're difficult to hear? And we've lost a little bit of this spirit, I think. I think sometimes in the church, when there's something going wrong in our life, we continue to sin. Too often do we go to people who just kind of say, yeah, well, you sin, I sin, we all sin, thanks for sharing. And sadly, there are AA meetings that have more respect towards sin than the church. There are 12-step groups that have a higher code of conduct towards sin than the church. You don't expect somebody going to AA to continue drinking without an intervention. And often that is an uninvited one. And you don't expect somebody going to that AA meeting to continue to drink without actually being asked to leave the group until they respect the rules of the group. And we think that's all well and good for that group, but for church, we allow people to continue to sin. And you can't control people. I'm not saying we should control each other. But what I'm saying is I think it's out of a misplaced sense of I shouldn't intervene in someone else's life. But yet, ignoring sin does not make it go away. And I'm standing here before you today as somebody who would not be repentant of certain sins without uninvited interventions, without people talking to me out of love, surely out of love. And though it's difficult to hear, it does not mean it's wrong to hear. I pray that we have ears to hear what Jesus is having to say to the churches. And if you don't want to hear what somebody else has to say, I pray at least you are concerned about what Jesus has to say. At least be concerned about. These are all red letters here, right? These are all red letters. And so we hear the church in Smyrna. What are they going through? They hear some hard things. This is really hard. Not only are they're economically poor, but they're persecuted. This is a place in Smyrna that is very difficult. This is one of the foremost capitals of the Roman Empire. So you had a really strong pagan cult about emperor worship, Caesar worship. You also had here really devout Jews. And between those two, there was a lot of persecution against the Christians and a lot of opportunities to compromise, a lot of opportunities to give up. It's probably not unusual that they're poor, because one of the first ways to experience persecution is to be boycotted. And the Christians face boycotts of their businesses because of their Christianity. Can you imagine your business? There's food taken out of your kids' mouths because you're Christian. Talk about a temptation to start to compromise. And who among us would blame you? Well, I need food, right? My kids need food, right? Oh yeah, sure. Why don't you just go ahead and water down those convictions? Why don't you go ahead and make some sacrifices to Caesar? Go ahead and say you're not a Christian. But I love that Jesus says, I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. A part of a revelation is seeing what's right there, but we can't see. It's behind it. And Jesus wants us to know that though you may not have economic security, though you may not have these things you feel like you may need from the world that never seem to satisfy, Jesus says you are rich. You have all you need. Not you're content, you're rich. The way I see it, you got it going on. You are in the upper class of the spiritual world, right? You are in the Ivy League of the spiritual world. You are the 1% of the spiritual world. You are doing great. And it can be easy when we don't take the time to see what Jesus and hear what Jesus has to say. We start to believe the lies of the world. And we start to give our money more and more to ourselves. And it's easy to allow that money to go to things, right? Vacations, DoorDash, Prime Day. We got the Prime Day list, and yet we have not given to the benevolent contribution all year. We have the vacation set for next year, but we have not given to special in the last 2 years. A significant amount of the church gives $0 to the regular contribution. Not 2 copper pennies, $0. And $0 usually indicates an issue in the heart. And you said, Drew, your staff, you can't be talking about money. Jesus talked about money every 9 verses in the Gospels. I think it's okay if we talk about money. It is a huge deal. I want us to know, church, that if you give money to the poor, if you give money to those in India or Central America or even those here who are in need, if you give money to local missions, you may feel that poorness for a while, but you are rich. You're rich. And if you can't see you're rich, we're starting to believe something that's just not true. The world tells us unless we have economic gains, unless we sacrifice everything at the idol of academia and economic prosperity, we are failures. And we are failures to our kids. It's not true. It's not true. How many among the rich are the least mentally healthy? How many among the rich are the most lonely? And here we have Jesus telling us, and I pray we can hear it this morning, if you don't have something you feel like you need to ask yourself, do I really need it? In the eternal view of things. It's easy. I'm one of these greedy people. I'm selfish by nature. And I know if I give to the church, I want to feel it. If I don't feel it, I want to give a little more. I want to feel that. I don't want to be so lost in it that I become enamored, become selfish, self-focused. It's so easy to feel like I don't have very much. And then you go to a different country. If you ever go to a country like India, my wife had been to India, and you share your conversion story, and us Americans are always so proud that some of us had to leave behind certain things to become a Christian. I gave up a scholarship. I felt like that was like a big deal. Other people I've left behind, I had to break up with my boyfriend to become a Christian. You know what they do in India when they tell their conversion stories? They roll up their sleeves and show you scars. They open their shirt and say, this is where my dad branded me. This is where my mom struck me. And it still happens. And then you feel like, wow, my story is not that good. I gave up the scholarship. But for people around the world, you realize what they're going through to be a Christian. And not to belittle or to all the things that we go through, they're just different. But I do think sometimes we've lost a little taste of reality in terms of what suffering is, what suffering means. And I don't want to say there's a one-size-fits-all suffering or gospel. You know, a certain author has said sometimes one of the biggest struggles in the church and with us feeling really the power of grace is that we kind of have a one-size-fits-all approach to discipleship. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. There's different seasons of life. You know, when you're a young person, you have a lot of energy, and the goal is to harness that energy toward doing good, for God. When you're older, it's not about harnessing the energy, it's about accessing the energy. How do I access this thing? And it's different. And some people in life, they have a lot of discouragement because they take on more than they should at that point in their season of discipleship. And sometimes the opposite's true when they don't take on enough. They can take on a lot more and they get spiritually sick. Or they take on too much and they get spiritually sick. And so it's not about everyone just ought to go do the exact same thing. No, you got to figure out for you. Just like there's 7 different letters to 7 different churches, what is Jesus calling you to do? Is it to take on more? Because, man, you can do more. Is it to scale back a bit because you're leading worship and you're doing kids ministry and you have 4 kids and you're getting a promotion at work and you're also the PTA president and you coach soccer? Maybe scale back a bit. Okay? It's a lot of stuff. So figure it out. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And one of the coolest things about this, as I wrap it up here, is that this is incredibly prophetic historically. This challenge to Smyrna, he says, some of you are going to be imprisoned. Some of you are going to suffer persecution. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer in verse 10. One of the most famous martyrdoms in history, because it's the first documented, is the martyrdom of Polycarp. And Polycarp lived in Smyrna. And he died around 140 AD, probably 50 years after this was written. So as this is read to the church in Smyrna, they go, how would you like Jesus to come here and say that? Guys, don't be afraid of the persecution that's coming. Don't be afraid of what's about to come. All right, see you later. You're like, oh man, can you tell us when, like what year or what day? Can you be more specific? But Polycarp, he's one of John the Apostle's disciples. So he's 2 steps removed from Jesus. And he's 86 years old. You know how powerful it is when the mature Christians of the church are faithful. When the mature Christians of the church serve. When they don't use wisdom as a Trojan horse for cowardice. And they don't use wisdom as an excuse to be sidelined. You guys have so much. You are part of the reason that my wife and I love being here. We're so much maturity and shepherding here. You guys are incredible. But don't buy into that lie that the best days are behind you. That it's over and now it's time to downshift, right? This is your farewell tour. No, you still got stuff to share. Polycarp was 86 years old and he was ratted out by another disciple. And the Roman consul there, who's very strong, right? They believe that Caesar is Lord. They arrest Polycarp at 86 and decide that this guy is easy prey to make an example of. It's a wrong decision, really. It's a mistake to choose Polycarp. They challenge him. They tie him up in front of the whole town in Smyrna, and they're going to burn him alive for being a heretic. And they tell Polycarp, so back then Christians were called atheists because they didn't believe in the true God, Caesar. Okay. So they say, Polycarp, renounce God. Say, I renounce the atheists. Renounce the atheists. And we won't burn you alive. And Polycarp looks back at them and says, I renounce the true atheists, you all. Yeah. So even then he's being a little cheeky, right? He's got a little fire in him. They said, renounce God or we will burn you alive. And he says, I have served God these long 86 years. How could I abandon him now? I will not blaspheme the true king. This is a story that has lived for 2,000 years because an 86-year-old man who anybody would have said, yeah, he's not as strong as he used to be. He stood up for Jesus. He said, I'm not going to renounce the faith. He did not. Read this verse again. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. Some of you will suffer persecution. Be faithful even to the point of death. I'll give you a victor's crown. The one who is victorious will not be hurt by the second death. The last thing Polycarp says is that these fires that you burn me with will burn for just a little while. But the fires of judgment burn forever. Look at what's the last sentence. Those who are victorious will not suffer the second death. You don't think this meant something to Polycarp? You don't think this verse resonated in his heart and his mind for 50 long years? He would have been 36 when this came out. 36 when it was read to the church in Smyrna. And he stands there and he's burned alive, except tradition says, believe it or not, right? Actually, a lot of the internet believes in the historicity of the martyrdom of Polycarp, is that the fires were burning, but it wasn't going as quickly as people were wanting it to. And the Romans became nervous because he was so confident. This is how it happened when the Romans killed a lot of women in the early church. They thought that killing women would show that women are weak and that that Christianity was fake. And the women were braver than the men. They were not renouncing Jesus either. And so every time Rome tried to pick out these people, it wasn't going to work because these people love Jesus. And no matter who you choose, we're not going to renounce him. And they actually ended up calling off the burning and they just stabbed him to just kill him because he was so confident even amongst the flames, praising God. And I want to share that with us this morning because it's on my heart as we come from different churches. And as we, in just a moment, we'll hear this final song. I want us to be able to understand that, yes, there's not a one-size-fits-all challenge for discipleship. It's not always going to be the same for all time. But I pray that if you take the time to listen to what Jesus has to say to you, ask yourself this question: am I doing too much? And do I need to pull back? Or am I doing too little? Do I need to do more? And that's not a question that we can answer in a vacuum. That's a question you only answer in community with others. I thought I was the most generous person in the world. And then I had a small group in Charlottesville, and we all shared what we were giving to special contribution. And I was put to shame by these men. To shame. And I thought, my goodness, I thought I was doing great. I thought I was so generous. It's only in community. And it wasn't to shame me. It was in community. You realize that you can probably do more than you think you can. Yeah. You're probably capable of more than you think you are. Right. You can probably push. But sometimes community will help you also back up and say, hey, you're doing a lot. Kind of slow down a little. We want you to run long and not hard. We want you to die a Christian. We don't want you to burn out in 2 years. We want you to make it. Community helps with both those things. And then no matter where you are in life, you've got to hear one or the other. And I know a lot of us, I pray none of us suffered the death that Polycarp faced, but I pray we can live with that same bravery. Polycarp, like Jesus, was ratted out by a friend. And just like Jesus, he faced death in a way. Jesus died. Jesus never wrote down a single word. The only religion to say so. Jesus didn't write this book, but he died a death so powerfully that he changed history. And I pray that we can in the same way, through suffering, through self-denial, through humility and vulnerability, that we'll change the world as well. Whether that's D.C., Montgomery County, PG County, whether that's Laurel, whether that's Howard County or Baltimore, Northern Virginia, we'll change the world. Not because of us, but because our faith points everyone to the true King.